I challenge myself to get rid of each and every excuse, and I am transformed by using this new awareness in many of my usual lifelong tendencies. I write with fury and with renewed enthusiasm this new book, Excuses Be Gone. Although it seems that he is also writing to himself, I act as a conduit and simply allow this material to pass through me. I'm going to take the begone excuses paradigm on the road with me to seminars I conduct around the world. I take people on stage and guide them through the paradigm and watch in awe as old habits begin to fade in front of thousands of people. An angry man with a short fuse agrees to remember his source of being, which is eternal sweetness. A woman stops smoking on the spot and turns it into a public pronouncement. A shy young woman in hers changes her subconscious programming and commits herself to a life of assertiveness and not victimization. A woman suffering from an eating disorder for years, who looks like a refugee from an extermination camp, lets me guide her through the paradigm, agrees to eat a healthy meal, and decides to let her long-standing excuses go on the spot. You are no longer a person with an eating disorder. Jump into June and the 3-hour engagement program at Excuses Be Gone. Airs nationwide in all major markets. Millions of people in the US and Canada view my presentation of this material on how to change anything about themselves that is not in harmony with who they would like to be, regardless of how deeply ingrained these behaviors, habits, or even illnesses are. The answer is overwhelming. The book ranks number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, as does Dr. Bruce Lipton's The Biology of Belief. I am lecturing all over the world on how to apply the material in Excuses Be Gone. Paradigm, when I am presented with a totally unexpected gift from the universe, an opportunity to abandon all excuses to face a situation that I never expected or believed possible. 3 days after the national premiere of my PBS special, Thursday in June, I was at Dr. Kepler's office in Kihei, Maui. Some blood tests done during a routine physical exam revealed that I have chronic lymphocytic leukemia, CLL, a disease of the blood and bone marrow. I was informed that CLL is believed to be incurable and is expected to slowly get worse. When I look back at my first reaction to the diagnosis of leukemia, I was in shock. They told me that my life would have to undergo a serious change. I would start to have night sweats, frequent bruising, elevated white blood cell counts and fatigue, among other things. I would have to meet with an oncologist and maybe prepare for possible chemotherapy and bone marrow transplants. My life was being redesigned for me by a team of well-meaning doctors, and they were giving me a host of excuses that I could use to explain my deteriorating health, my lack of energy, and my inability to go on and do the work of empowering people and help transform the planet into a more God-made habitat. The same day that I received the CLL diagnosis report, I met a woman who was a nurse practitioner and wanted my support in her alternative medicine practice. She was using some of my more recent books, particularly The Power of Intention, with her patients and had come to Maui to see if I could help her. When I told him that morning I received the news of my leukemia, he decided to come over to serve me. That there was no accident in our meeting. That same day I was walking in shock. Pam McDonald became my health professional and helped me redesign my eating habits to get the right nutritional balance to help my body heal. Pam wrote a very important book called The Perfect Genetic Diet, for which I later wrote the foreword, and presented her research and work to many of my seminar attendees over the next couple of years. This was indeed a divine appointment. He had spent more than a full year writing daily, creating a book designed to help people overcome their most uncompromising excuses. He was writing about being able to overcome any genetic predisposition and reprogram the subconscious mind to overcome the most ingrained early childhood programming by eliminating each and every excuse. Now I was forced to apply this same teaching to my own diagnosis of leukemia. I said at the beginning of Excuses Be Gone, therefore, the title of this book is really a statement for you, as well as for that system of explanations that you have created. It is my intention that all excuses disappear. A quote from Gandhi that has always stuck with me is, "My life is my message." And so it has been with me. Everything I have written has emerged from my own life experiences. Learn to overcome difficulties, rising above the ordinary, take on unpopular causes, defy authority, transcend abandonment, overcoming addictions, relationship struggles, and parenting issues. It was all being presented to me by a supreme source. For the first few months, I allowed myself to accept the protocol of how to deal with a body that has blood and bone marrow cancer. I started having severe night sweats, noticed more strange bruises, and became more easily fatigued. I quit my yoga practice for almost a year and traded my normally busy and exciting life for one of caution and even subconscious fear. And I read all the literature they send me on CLL, and somehow I embraced that it is incurable and will worsen the messages that are so rampant in the medical literature. I was talking on television about not having excuses to live an extraordinary life. I was promoting a book written with the intention of teaching others to erase each and every excuse, big or small, and I was still unconsciously adopting my own excuses, rather than seeing this leukemia diagnosis as a gift to emphasize the truth of what I had been researching and writing for the past 2 years. He had accepted that he could literally change genetic information. He had supported the idea that he could undo the initial programming. I taught these radical ideas in my writing, in a multitude of public lectures, and on millions of television screens. But for a brief moment or two, I forgot that I was instantly put into another great excuse factory called, I have a serious illness. Now I can see that a truth does not really stick to our consciousness until we experience it directly. All my research, writing, lectures, and pontificate meant nothing in terms of really understanding the message of living an unexcused life. This leukemia was a gift and, like everything else in my life, it appeared precisely on time. At the end of 2009, and throughout 2010 and beyond, I began to use this gift that was given to me, in a way that was beneficial to both me and those who were making themselves available to my teachings. I worked the begone excuses paradigm in myself, and I worked it in my writing and my speech as well. I asked myself the 7 questions, and these were my short answers to myself. Is the cancer excuse true? I can never be sure that leukemia has to slow me down or get worse. Therefore, the excuse may or may not be true. So I decide not to believe something that is as likely to be false as it is true. Where did the excuse come from? From the endless messages about cancer that flood the medical literature. From a part of the medical community that lives off cancer. From internet. Of the things that I have heard, etc. But the excuse did not come from me or my source of being, which is eternal well-being and divine love. What is the reward for using this excuse? By using the I'm sick excuse, I can take the easy way out. I can avoid dealing with my own inner capacity for well-being and healing. I can blame the food, the air, my parents, the water, and the fact that we are all forced to live in a carcinogenic world. I can get a lot of sympathy, and of course I can be right, which is the gigantic reward of the ego. What would my life be like if I couldn't use these excuses? This was the most useful for me. If I were unable to believe that I have to be disabled in any way because of this diagnosis, I would be forced to have thoughts like, I am as strong as I need to be doing what I choose. I have the inner capacity and connection to God to heal anything. I am a vigorous person who has all the vivacity and vitality to achieve whatever I set my mind to. Can I create a rational reason to change? Yes. Emphatically. My decision to live a life without an I'm sick excuse makes sense to me. It is doable. It will allow me to feel good, and it will allow me to be connected to God. And with God, anything is possible. Can I access universal cooperation to get rid of this excuse? Yes, 1,000,000 times, yes. How do I continually reinforce this new way of being? Create an inner knowing that removes all doubt. Living from my higher self and respecting my eternal divinity, having regular conversations with my habitual subconscious mind, and stopping when I am about to take the leukemia excuse and replace it with a conscious response that is fully aligned with my commitment to living a life. Healthy life. Practice more meditation and reduce the noise level in my life. Spend more time in the ocean and in nature. Make my connection to my source to be my #1 relationship in life. Work the paradigm regularly. From this perspective of seeing more clearly, it is now evidently obvious to me that my writing and my lectures on living in excuses have disappeared. Life came at the exact moment God told me, here's an opportunity for you to really take this message home. Now practice what I have revealed to you about yourself and continue your commitment to serving others in a spectacular way. It is the spring of 2011 and I have been living with my diagnosis of leukemia for almost 2 years. I have been the patient of 2 oncologists and I do blood tests for my white blood cell count on a regular basis. I have been following the eating protocol outlined and supervised by my friend Pam McDonald, who is a nurse practitioner and expert in alternative medicine. I have stayed away from Bikram hot yoga for the last year on the advice of my doctors. I've been practicing the begone excuses paradigm on a daily basis, and I have included my leukemia diagnosis in my lectures as an example of how I am dealing with this situation in my body. ABC World News picked up this story and aired a national segment on my leukemia diagnosis that ran the day after Thanksgiving last year. I heard from Dr. Raina Piskova, an eye surgeon who has a practice in Madera, California. She tells me, I am going to make a second trip to Brazil to see Juan de Dios. I would very much like you to come too. I can't stress enough how important I feel this is to you. A man who calls himself Juan de Dios has been treating people for over 40 years in Abadiânia, Brazil. Millions of people from around the world have come to this small town to receive treatment from this simple man whose surgeries are performed by entities that enter his body. I know of Juan de Dios and the stories of miraculous healings that have emanated from the Casa de Dio Ignacio because 8 years ago my wife, Marceline, visited him twice and was asked to attend one of his healing sessions. For a long time I thought that I would love to visit there and experience firsthand this unique person and the miracles that I have read about. Make one thing very clear, I do not heal anyone, God heals, and in His infinite goodness He allows entities to heal and comfort my brothers. I am simply an instrument in the divine hands of God. While many are skeptical of this miraculous man from Brazil, I have come to a place in my life where I have an open mind to everything. I plan to join Raina on her journey, but decide not to due to my impending writing deadlines. However, she is on a mission for my healing and makes intricate arrangements for me to have a remote healing experience. She tells me that she is almost possessed, so sure is she of my need to experience the divine healing offered only by this man in the small town of Abadiânia. Through FedEx, send holy herbs and holy water along with instructions to me. She tells me to take the herbs, to dress in white and to take a photo of me from 4 different angles for Juan de Dios to see. After emailing the photos, they tell me that the surgery will take place on the night of April 21, 2011, which is my mother's 95th birthday. I go to bed at 10 o'clock on Wednesday night according to instructions. I sleep in all white clothes, I drink the holy water and meditate in peace. In the morning I wake up to a phone call from Raina, who will also be operated simultaneously with Juan de Dios in Abadiânia. She informs me that I need to go back to bed and sleep for the next 24 hours, and treat this remote healing in the same way as if a local surgeon had removed my gallbladder. I listen to Raina's pleas, however, I do not listen. I feel fine and I don't remember anything that happened during the night. I decide that I am going to take my normal 90-minute walk, and perhaps the entities could not locate me for any type of healing because Juan de Dios was in Brazil with a time difference of 7 hours. I walk out the door but do not advance more than 500 meters before collapsing. I need the help of 2 of my children to get back to my room. They help me get back to bed and that's where I stay, sleeping for the next 24 hours, just as Raina had instructed me. I am fatigued and feel exceptionally weak. As the days go by, I take on flu-like symptoms, cough up phlegm, and can only eat a little soup. This is my condition for a full week. No exercise, no swimming, no walking, just detoxing from something invisible that I don't understand. Raina tells me over the phone that on Thursday in April, precisely 1 week after the remote surgery, I'm going to have another remote procedure called removal of the sutures. There are no sutures, of course, and there would be none for a blood cancer cure. Wednesday night, April 87, at 11 p.m., 6 a.m., April 88 in Brazil, I take my designated blessed herbs and drink the water blessed by Juan de Dios, and I lie down dressed in white. I am weak and a little haggard from not having eaten any solid foods and being quite ill for the last week. I wake up the next morning feeling very different from what I have felt before. The first thing I discover is that my new wristwatch has stopped working. This is strange because it is a precision instrument that guarantees that it will not malfunction or waste time. I walk out of the room to greet my son and daughter, and I am overwhelmed by deep, unconditional love for both of them. I reach out to hug them both and tell them how much I truly love them. Sans and Serena ask me, "Dad, have you been using drugs? You have no pupils in your eyes and your left eye appears to be scratched." I feel that I am pure love. My plants are pure love. The ocean calls me to come swim in this liquid love potion. My children look like angels to me. I feel strong, hungry, and totally happy. I have no idea what happened in my room last night. All I know for sure is that the world and everyone in it feels very different from anything I have ever experienced before. I am in a state of ecstasy every day since my suture removal experience several days ago. An annoying lawsuit disappears, and all I feel for this apparent adversary is love. I walk and swim with renewed energy, a greater sense of empowerment than I have ever felt in my entire life, and especially since the diagnosis of leukemia almost 2 years ago. Little more than a week passes and it is May of the year 2011, my first birthday. I'm in San Francisco to finish filming a movie called My Greatest Teacher, which is about how I found my father's grave in Biloxi, Mississippi, and was able to communicate with him and forgive him. I am in my hotel suite, sitting up in bed meditating in the wee hours of the morning. Suddenly I am overwhelmed by a very strong feeling that I need to be an instrument of an outpouring of unconditional love. I grab a wad of dollar bills and walk out of the St. Francis Hotel, spending most of my birthday handing out love and money to the homeless. I give passionate hugs and listen intently to toothless men who are as grimy as you can imagine. I approach the ladies who are inspecting the garbage cans in Union Square for the possibility of a prize in the form of an empty soda can or a discarded plastic water bottle. I don't notice the dirt, I only see the unfolding of God in these empty eyes. And I'm so in love with everyone I touch. I spend all the money and go back to my hotel room and sit on my bed crying in gratitude for what I was able to experience today. This is the most memorable birthday of my years. 20 days have passed since the removal of the invisible sutures, and now it is May. I am sitting in my meditation chair and I hear a different inner voice telling me, "Don't go for a walk today. Now you can do yoga." I am visibly shocked. I have avoided my hot yoga practice under the advice of various medical experts for almost a year. I immediately get up and drive to the yoga studio in Maui that I once went to regularly, and complete the 1-minute session, doing both sets in each and every asana. I'm a little rusty, but thrilled to my core to be able to do what I love so much, minutes of intense exercise. I am living my enthusiasm and imbued with the energy of divine love. In the last chapter I briefly examined the 6th question from Excuses Begone. Paradigm: can I access universal cooperation to get rid of old habits? As I re-examine the miraculous events that led to my healing with Juan de Dios and the entities that work through him, I can now clearly see a fundamental truth. When we shift our energies to live off our original nature and practice the 4 cardinal virtues described by Lao Tzu, which include 1. Reverence for all life, 2. Natural sincerity, 3. Gentleness, and 4. Support, we align ourselves with our only source of being and receive universal cooperation. These 4 virtues are not external dogmas, they are part of our original nature. That my experience with Juan de Dios and the miraculous results that followed these strange events were all a function of my shift to a more God-conscious place in my life. The familiar message of the New Testament is, with God, everything is possible. That leaves nothing out, including curing an incurable disease. Dr. Reina Piscova's insistence that I have an encounter with entities through Juan de Dios was in fact a divine intervention. It was related to my adherence to the 4 cardinal virtues when I made the change to live more and more of an excuses begone perspective. I can see quite clearly that the presence of this leukemia was an opportunity for me to teach, through my own example, how to live from a place without excuses and divine love. I know that Raina's persistence in putting me through this experience was inspired by a force greater than both of us. I know this to be true, because Raina has confided to me that it was impossible for her to shake off or even ignore this burning desire of hers that I experience these healing entities firsthand. 5 months after my remote healing experience and the vitality I regained from remote spiritual surgery, I was invited to the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, to attend a 4-day meeting where Juan de Dios would appear in person. Some people a day, dressed only in white, passed him, and the entities performed various types of spiritual surgeries. They put me in line with everyone else, with no special priority of any kind. When I stood in front of this man of God from Brazil, I was just one person in a long line of people. He looked at me and said in Portuguese, "You are fine," 3 words that flooded me with tears of gratitude and deep emotion. Later, I sat in what is called the current room at the invitation of Juan de Dios, and drank the loving energy that permeated the entire conference center. Debbie Ford, an old friend and colleague, was in the cabin next to me at Omega. She was there to undergo spiritual surgery for a rare and debilitating cancer that she had lived with for many years. Several times a day, after her intervention with the entities, I went to her cabin to speak with her about my incredible healing experience. Despite how weak I was, I saw in his eyes the feeling that something truly miraculous was happening, and I was so happy that I had decided to take this journey. Even though she finally succumbed to the disease in 2013, I felt like this beautiful soul was also being healed on some level. The morning after I heard the words of the entities through Juan de Dios, I was invited to address the entire contingent of people in a huge tent. Looking out over a white sea, I told them about my experience and what they had told me the day before, and rededicated myself to sharing this gift and helping more people move into a God-made place where they can engage the one divine mind. To send universal cooperation your way. I have long held the belief taught in A Course in Miracles that there are really only 2 emotions, fear and love. When we are afraid, there is no place for love; when we are in love, there is no room for fear. When I look back with a clearer sense to the experience I had the morning after the removal of the suture, it is clearly obvious to me that those divine healing entities placed a kind of enchanting love within my consciousness, and in doing so there was no more space. Because of fear. Never before had I known the feeling of love for everyone and everything that soaked my being. The very word leukemia is so loaded with forebodings that I must have internalized some of the uneasiness associated with the idea of having cancer cells flowing through my blood. The first day after my suture removal experience I went to my fridge for a non-alcoholic beer, which I have done every day for some time. Although I stopped drinking alcohol many years before, I still enjoyed the taste of non-alcoholic beer, but that day, something told me that this was not what I should be consuming. I let go of an old habit at the time and have not been tempted to put that drink on my body again. The remote healing experience led me to seek healthy ways to love and care for myself, and for some as yet unknown reason, that non-alcoholic beer no longer resonated with me as a healthy habit. Now I know for sure that this experience was orchestrated by a force much greater than myself. I have always affirmed that I am a teacher, and this experience, along with so many other wonderful events, was given to me to use as an example to serve and support others. I no longer say, "I have leukemia," which I said routinely during the first days of my diagnosis. Instead, I start each day with the statement that the entities spoke to me while I was standing before Juan de Dios: "I'm fine. In fact, I am in perfect health." I have learned to use these 2 words with great reverence. This is the name of God as revealed to Moses in Exodus 3:14. I don't use anything external to myself to define who I am or what I am doing. I do not determine my health status based on what a number says in a medical impression. Therefore, I have avoided looking at those kinds of reports. I feel strong, I eat healthy, I exercise daily and I have a meditation practice that allows me to be in conscious contact with God. What I see most clearly today is that I have divine assistance, which I believe is true for everyone. By eliminating fear, I have allowed divine love to fill my inner consciousness. And this love, which I have felt so personally and so powerfully since that day in April when I experienced the full impact of remote surgery, has been my healing. I don't need to look anywhere else for validation of my claims. I'm fine, I'm in perfect health. That it is my own presence that I really am who I am and determines my state of health. My job is to live each day in a state of gratitude for this presence that I am. I am here to also teach all who will listen that they too have this invisible divine I am presence. It is their very essence and they must trust it and remain in an exalted state of appreciation for it every day. Sufis tell us that when we walk through the garden and step on a thorn, we must always remember to give thanks. For the thorn of leukemia that brought me closer to my own presence I am, and the only divine and omniscient mind of God, I offer a sincere thanks. Thank you, thank you. I'm reading a little book that is creating the kind of epiphany awareness that happened years ago when I first read Drive. Albert Ellis's book A Guide to a Rational Life. Throughout the short chapters of this book, I keep feeling like you are telling me, there is something of great importance here to you, pay attention and take notes. For example, I love these words from the last chapter, in all creation, in all eternity, in all the realms of your infinite being, the most wonderful fact is what is emphasized in the first chapter of this book, you are God. You are the I am, the one that I am. The book is The Power of Conscience by Neville Goddard, who wrote 10 books under the pseudonym Neville. It's like a magnet in my power. I read, then sit down and reflect every few sentences, then write myself some notes. I try to put it down, but it keeps calling me to pick it up again. I have had this experience many times in my life, and when it happens, I know that there is a force at work that tells me that this is part of my life plan, a dharma that I cannot ignore. By November 2010, I listened to many of Neville's lectures and completed 4 full readings of The Power of Consciousness. I order 8 copies of the book as a Christmas present for each of my children, encouraging them to explore this radical idea that imagining creates reality. I ask that you let me know how you feel about the book after reading it, and I give you one of Neville's most shocking quotes. Assume that you are already what you are looking for and your assumption, although false, if held, will become fact. Each responds with the same sentiment, which is essentially, thank you Dad. I tried to read it and had to reread it over and over again and then I got lost. Too deep, too confusing. To me, Neville Goddard's words retain their power to electrify, as he easily states that our thoughts create the world, and they do so in the most literal sense. I feel almost compelled to make his teachings more accessible and understandable to the contemporary world. I decide to write a book called Wishes Fulfilled and create a special 9th PBS engagement to present the empowering ideas he has sparked in me. I feel that these could lead to, and perhaps initiate, an acceleration of the shift in the collective consciousness. My own path has been to take somewhat abstract and often overly complicated ideas and make them available in a simplified and understandable way. I feel like this is what Drive. Maslow passed it on to me at his death, to introduce the average person to the hidden powers of self-realization that are latent within each of us. Neville passed away in October 1972, just as my writing career was beginning. Now, some 40 years after his passing, his many lectures and books are awakening a sleeping inquisitor within me. So far I've written books and the ideas Neville offers churn inside me like a cyclone that needs to be expressed. I begin a complete reading of the New Testament, paying special attention to the words of Jesus, who offers divine wisdom that we are all God. Our highest self is God, it is our pure essence. We come from God and we are God, we just have to get past the many mental viruses and religious teachings that want us to believe this is nonsense and blasphemy. I then immerse myself in Ascended Master Saint Germain's I Am discourses and feel the excitement roaring through me as I realize that the 2 words that I am are the name of God as reported in Exodus, and that every time I say those words I mean the name of God. I read The Power of Consciousness for the 5th time in less than 6 months. I am eager to put these powerful teachings into practice in my own life, so I retreat to my sacred writing space on Maui every day and melt into them. I see that the greatest gift that I have been given is the gift of my imagination. By placing in my imagination a statement of I am God realized, I and all of humanity could achieve any goal. This only requires assuming now the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. I declare myself well, I am in perfect health, and the universe responds by sending me the energy that matches my statement. I am that it is firmly lodged in my imagination. I live in an ecstatic consciousness. My hand moves through the empty pages and fills them from I don't know where or how. They are using me as an instrument. The chapters keep flowing, and I love this almost automatic writing feeling. I write about what I consider the 5 most outstanding teachings of Neville's work, the work of Ule S. Anderson, and the channeled teachings of Saint Germain. Meanwhile, miracles happen every day. I speak with my producer Nikki Vettel, and we have the full blessing and permission of the powers that be on PBS to create a 3-hour special. This will air across the country for years to come, giving millions of people the opportunity to discover what I am so excited to share. I refuse to allow the fear of potential criticism from those who have a different view of God to make me hold back something. I study the words of Jesus and his many pronouncements. I make no effort in filming the actual video for this 9th PBS special. March 2012 arrives with the new engagement special, Wishes Fulfilled, which airs in practically all television markets in the United States and Canada. Over $18 million is raised for public broadcasting in the United States, bringing the total raised to over $200 million from 1998, when I began this journey of visiting almost every PBS station during the week of commitment. The Wishes Fulfilled book jumps to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and I receive a ton of emails from millions of people telling me of the many miracles they have seen happen in their lives as they apply the spiritual messages in my book. I say a silent prayer of gratitude for Neville's brilliance. He took the psalm, "You are God's," as the literal truth of man's condition. I carefully studied all of Neville's teachings, particularly those on the power of consciousness, and I studied the words of Jesus and the I Am discourses, and did my best to keep all these divine messages simple, understandable, and applicable in the world. Now, I observe with great pride and personal enthusiasm the enormous positive response to these teachings, the awareness that God is not an external concept but rather an internal consciousness. That knowing that we are fused with God, beyond the ego, the manifestation of our desires is not only probable, it is guaranteed. I am so blessed and proud to have had the inner drive to read, reread, study, and put into practice the words of this eloquent and charismatic teacher. Neville captures the pure logic of the principles of the creative mind like perhaps no other figure of his time. Your work has come to me these last 2 years with the insistence that I pay attention, study it carefully, and make it available to the widest possible audience. These Wishes Fulfilled teachings carry with them the power to make heaven on earth come true. I have often quoted the Buddhist proverb, "When the student is ready, the teacher will appear." Although it is not always evident in that moment, all of our experiences in this life, even those that are painful, have a true and necessary purpose in the path of our soul. Today I can see quite clearly that Neville's teachings struck me at a time that seems to have been exquisitely in tune with my degree of preparation as a student and teacher of higher consciousness principles and spirituality. In the early days of my writing, as I indicated above, I never mentioned the words God, spirituality, or higher consciousness. This was because I was writing from the place of my own preparation. The teachers I needed during that time were helping me bring my message of motivation and self-development to audiences. As my level of preparation rose, so did the spiritual awareness of the teachers who appeared. When I look back, I can see that my entire career was beginning when I was that child in an orphanage. I can see change happening throughout all my years in high school, in the military, as a curious college student, as a young school teacher, as a college professor, and for over 4 decades as a writer of many books and speaker for millions of people around the world. From a distance, I look at everything and can see the patterns from my early days to now as a septuagenarian. It has been a long-term journey, and now I clearly see the general motive. He couldn't see, at the time of every position he was in, how each step led to a higher rung on the ladder toward God realization. I went from never using or even considering the words God, higher consciousness, or spirituality to slowly introducing these ideas on rare occasions in my writings and prayers. I gradually shifted to a place where I was open to considering the meaning of writing about a relationship with God and discovering that the next step was to become more like God. From Neville Goddard and Saint Germain in the I Am Discourses, I learned the infinite wisdom of living from the higher self, that is, as a piece of God. Wow, what a trip! With the benefit of 20/20 in hindsight, I realize that 13 years before writing Wishes Fulfilled, I wrote a book called Manifest Your Destiny. This was my degree of preparation at the time. I was in the early stages of my transition from being a psychology and motivation-based writer to being a student and teacher of spirituality and higher consciousness. Back, I was focusing on getting what you want, emphasizing that when you learn the principles of manifestation, you will be able to do so using the 9 important components of the manifestation process. Each of these 9 principles of manifestation was and still is essential to living a life in which one can attract all that one desires. 15 years later, I was gradually shifting into the areas of God consciousness. The type of manifestation I explore in Fulfilled Wishes is based on my own inquiries into the works of the I Am Discourses and, in particular, the teachings of Neville Goddard. It's not about getting what you want by practicing specific principles. The theme of Fulfilled Wishes is that spirituality is not about manifesting what you want, it is about manifesting who you are. Now I know that all my desires for things come from an awareness of lack. That I am now whole and complete, and that the process of manifestation is about becoming all that I was meant to be, recovering my divinity, my connection to my source. Living a life of God realization is what true manifestation is. Dwelling day by day in thoughts of peace and love for each creature is the path of consciousness that leads to abundant peace. This is what I was supposed to add to my original book on the manifestation written years before. By thinking and acting as the creative source, I transcend the ego's desire for more and more physical things, and come to understand that I do not manifest what I want. I manifest who I am. By staying aligned with the Tao, or God, or the Divine Mind, I draw all the power of the creative source of the universe. It is my highest self. It is God, and when I live this way, I am. I can also see clearly now that my fascination with Neville's teachings and the I Am Discourses was being driven by a force that wanted me to understand that it is only by being aligned with God consciousness that one can attract spirituals. The guidance of those who have left this earthly domain. By avoiding judgment, criticism, condemnation, and all thoughts of harm, angels of higher consciousness recognize themselves in a person who is connected to pure love, and the universe will conspire to open those doors to abundance and the supreme happiness that have remained narrow, closed. Now I see clearly that the longer a person lives a life of divine love, the more guidance he receives from non-physical sources. The message here is clear to me now. In the highest vision of the soul, an awakened angel is agitated, so use your imagination in such a way as to keep it fully aligned with divine love. Not that these powerful teachings, which became the backdrop for Wishes Fulfilled in 2012, were unknown or unavailable to me 13 or even 5 years earlier, it is always a question of preparation. I became more open to the ideas that spirit guidance was there for me, and to the idea that God was not an external concept but deeper within me and everyone who ever lived. The Creator planted a fragment of Himself within humanity, a spark of His I Am nature that can grow into the fire of understanding that in my most basic essence, I am God. As my own personal disposition moved to accept what was once considered a radical concept, the teachers I was ready for began to appear with amazing alacrity. What was once dark and discarded by me at an earlier stage in my life became sensitive and intensely exciting. Fueled by my enthusiasm, this evolved through me in the book and the PBS special titled Wishes Compliments. On the national television broadcast of my 9th PBS special, based on Neville's teachings and I Am speeches, I was able to bring Anita Moorjani on stage to tell the amazing story of her near-death experience and death. Subsequent incredible end-stage lymphoma cure. Anita's story came to me at the same time that I was preparing to receive these mind-blowing teachings. This teacher came into my life when I was able to help her publish her book, Dying to Be Me, and I had the privilege of writing the foreword. Anita discovered firsthand that she was not separated from God and that she had been healed from the ravages of a debilitating cancer that had advanced so far that she had only a few hours to live. No one who had been in this terminal stage of cancer had survived, yet Anita returned, cancer-free, to teach others what she had learned during her unconscious, near-death comatose state. His story has touched the lives of millions of people and the book instantly became a New York Times bestseller. Now he travels the world sharing with the public what he learned and knows for sure. All we have to do is treasure our own magnificence and know in our hearts that we are always committed to God, and to God, truly all things are possible. All the circumstances that had to fit, so that I could know the phenomenal experience of Anita on the other side. My insatiable desire to place her in Hong Kong, help her tell her story, arrange for her book to be published, and then bring her to America to appear on my PBS special was all choreographed by a higher power. Millions of people were able to change their own development as a result of Anita's book and the emergence of PBS. They needed to see and hear from someone who had experienced the power within all of us and reinforce the idea that we are all God. I am in awe of the exquisite synchronicities that were at stake here. In fact, when we students are ready, the teachers and teachings just magically appear. It is the middle of June of 2011 and I am back in Assisi. Several months ago I arranged with Reed Tracy, my close friend and CEO of Hay House, my exclusive editor for the past 12 years, to promote this journey we call Experiencing the Miraculous. The itinerary takes us to fly to the holy places of Assisi, Lourdes, and Medjugorje by private plane. In each of these three places, where verifiable miracles have occurred, I will give a 2-hour lecture. 162 people, the maximum number of seats on our chartered plane, have signed up for this once-in-a-lifetime trip. This is my third visit to the house of the saint who has been so pivotal in my spiritual evolution for the past 20 years, and I knew when I was planning this spiritual odyssey that I had to return here. My vision is to truly live the ideals that defined the life of Saint Francis of Assisi, who has been such an enormous force in my life over the past decades. When I check into the hotel, I am offered a brown robe to wear, designed in the same way that the monks of the Franciscan order wear, and like the one Saint Francis wore when he founded this spiritual order more than 800 years ago. I put on my robe and walk around the hotel grounds here in this town in central Italy, and I'm in a state of semi-amazement to be back where I found those miracles of healing in the 19th century. I touch my knee in remembrance and offer a silent prayer of gratitude to the man whose face I watched as he asked me to stand up with John Grable dangling from my back, and he gave me a healing that prevented me from even considering knee replacement surgery. The next day, our group, which includes 3 of my children, visits the many holy sites that are a testament to the influence that one person can have on the world's population, more than 8 centuries after their passing. Francesco's life was one in which he had a deep connection with Jesus Christ. He was convinced that living a Christ-conscious life could literally bring forgiveness, love, faith, hope, light, and joy to a world where people are willing to let go of revenge, hatred, doubt, despair, darkness, and sadness. I was deeply moved to receive permission to lecture the following evening in a very special place that had never been available for such an event before, the Church of San Pietro, a Benedictine abbey that was founded in the 10th century. We are also given permission to bring a video camera to record this conference. Francesco is surely playing a role by allowing me to lecture and film it here. The date of my lecture is the summer solstice. Tuesday, June. That night we are greeted by a Franciscan monk as everyone quietly enters the church. He smiles approvingly when I talk about this amazing structure, which was here in Assisi at the time that Francesco and his devotees were trying to make an impact on the corruption that had so infused the Catholic hierarchy at the time. This is an electrifying environment, yet it is serene and remarkably quiet. There is a statue of Jesus on the cross, and I will speak in a few moments under this ancient sculpture. As I wait behind the scenes, I feel a tingle that is unlike anything I have experienced before speaking. Before my lecture, my children Serena, Sans, and Sage personally gave me an affectionate introduction. Then I tell my long story with San Francisco and I feel like I'm in a supercharged energy field. I can't help the idea that he is here with me. As I prepare to wrap up my 2-hour video presentation, I read a deeply moving fictional story by Nikos Kazantzakis simply titled, San Francisco. It tells of Francesco's transformation from a young soldier who had nearly died in prison to a renouncer who gave up everything he owned and dedicated his life to repairing his church and living the message of Jesus without compromise. The story is told through the eyes of Francesco's constant companion, Brother Leo. I have read this particular novel 5 or 6 times and it always stirs up deep emotions in me. Now I choose to read a short passage in which Francesco faces what he fears most, a leper, whom Jesus has ordered to kiss him on the mouth to eradicate his apprehension towards those so horribly afflicted by leprosy. As I read the story to the group, I was suddenly filled with excitement. I freeze on stage and can't keep talking. I am crying uncontrollably. I have lost control of myself. I feel as if another being has taken over me. For the first time in more than years of public speaking, I feel like I am not myself. I am not Wayne Dyer, giving a lecture that is being filmed to be part of a spiritual travel journal. I merge with this being that has been in and out of my life, sometimes on the periphery and sometimes deep within my soul. We become one. Tears run down my face and I feel Francesco as if he has merged with me. There are no words to describe this feeling. My hands are outstretched and the audience stands in the church and just holds out their arms to me. They stay with me and I feel their loving embrace even though there is no contact or movement. There is no applause, the conference is complete. I am both an emotional wreck and a supremely ecstatic piece of God. People come up to me as I leave church and tell me that they have never been in such a fast-paced space and at the same time it has taken their breath away. I know something very dramatic and powerful just happened. I have experienced the merging of my inner self with a spirit that has long played a dominant role in my personal and spiritual development. The group heads to a restaurant, but I can't even think of eating. I take a taxi back to my hotel room, where I meditate for 2 hours. I'm not hungry. I feel drained, like I've somehow gone through a powerful detox procedure. I'm up all night reliving what happened in church and trying to figure out how I, as a seasoned professional speaker, could have so blatantly lost control on stage. There is a clear sequence of circumstances and events that led to my experience in the Church of San Pietro in Assisi, when I felt the presence of Saint Francis enter my body and leave me speechless and immobile as well. Up until that day of the summer solstice of 2011, I had written and spoken a great deal about the concept of the unity and fusion of souls as God realization is achieved. In each of my books, beginning with You'll See It When You Believe It, written more than years before, where I wrote an entire chapter on unity, I was able to speak sensibly about these esoteric topics. That the many books that followed were my attempts to further expand this idea that we are all connected, and that this idea of being completely fused with another spiritual counterpart is a genuine possibility. But my clearest vision today, when I look back, is a view of myself at that altar in the incredible church where Saint Francis once stood, in that magnificent city of Assisi. They took me to a place where I could really experience the difference between writing about the unit and experiencing it firsthand. It is like the difference between knowing God through the writing of others and knowing God by making conscious contact with God. It was time to see the bigger picture of my life's journey from a young writer and speaker on psychological matters, to a supposed level of experience in spiritual pursuits, to finally come to know through my own personal experience with St. Francis. This was truly a divine appointment arranged by the invisible forces that handle such heavenly affairs. It is similar to my absolute knowledge today that the years I spent in a number of foster homes and orphanages in the first decade of my life were offered to me as the only way I could really get to know the idea of self-reliance. I see those early years as the path that I was commanded to traverse, the necessary first baby steps that I needed to internalize in order to have self-reliance firmly implanted in my consciousness. My early writings on the unity and interconnectedness of all souls on a spiritual level were my tentative steps towards the final realization of being able to experience them firsthand. Saint Francis has been a prominent figure in the overall pattern of my life, since I was a child intrigued by the possibility of a secret garden, to this day in which I have become a recognized spiritually influential teacher. In the Creator's eyes, he had to have more than a cursory knowledge of Francis of Assisi. I had to not only get to know him, I had to become him. That day of the summer solstice I knew without a doubt that we had momentarily merged. Everyone present at the Abbey that day could also feel the presence of Francis. And when I saw photos of myself from a variety of different cameras at the time, there were huge orbs visible. In fact, I included one of those photos filled with those mysterious orbs in an insert in Wish's Full Compliments. While I was putting the finishing touches on that book, I received a letter from Brenda Babinski, who had been in the audience at a recent talk I gave in Canada. She wrote to tell me about a light that surrounded me on stage during my performance. Then something even stranger happened. Dr. Wayne, I was talking about San Francisco, and before my very eyes, it was transformed. Your body was dressed in a long robe and your features were transformed to be Saint Francis of Assisi. It lasted only a moment, but it was powerful, emotional, and very, very real. But then something even stranger happened. You started talking about Lao Tzu and you became him. A long braid ran down your back and I could see your face completely transform into Lao Tzu. Again, it only lasted a moment, but the experience will last with me forever. For most of my life, until very recently, I would surely have dismissed such an event as not only impossible but delusional as well. But now I see with a much clearer vision. I was there at the Abbey of San Pietro in Assisi once before when this holy man came to me. I saw for a split second a vision of him imploring me to get up, and in that moment I had a healing of my damaged knee that defied all medical guidance. Before that, Francesco entered my wife's heart and mine and touched our souls as we sat and meditated in the chapel where he lived and died. On that day of the 2011 solstice, I felt that I became one with this divine being for a few precious moments, in front of the video camera and before the spiritual seekers. Francesco experienced stigmata for the last 2 years of his life. His devotion to the Christ consciousness was such that he became one with Jesus. Today I clearly see that the true essence of living from a place of pure unconditional divine love is to become one with our source of being, thinking, and acting firmly as God. When one's being is saturated with pure love, as it was for me on my third miraculous visit to Assisi, giving a talk about the impact this saint has had on me, telling the story of how Francesco discovered that Jesus had come to him in the form of a leper and how he had overcome his fear by kissing that leper on the mouth. In that moment, divine love united me with Francesco and we became one. I have always loved observing Mother Teresa, as she looked into the eyes of those she literally pulled out of the gutter. Each one of them is Jesus in disguise. I know that we are all connected, all one. Unconditional divine love can be so empowering that it can hurt Christ, it can allow one to see the development of God in everyone, and as I learned in those magical moments in Assisi that are recorded on a DVD program called Experiencing the Miraculous, you can merge the souls of what only appear to be two separate beings into one unit. Since that day in the Church of San Pietro with San Francisco, I have felt it with me at all times. I am humbled by the mere thought that I could have mingled as one with such a being, if only for a moment, but more likely for eternity. I will meet 350 people who have agreed to join me on a cruise in the Mediterranean Sea, aboard the fabulous Celebrity Cruises flagship, Equinox. I announced to the group that I have arrangements to give 5 two-hour lectures while at sea, traveling between Rome, Santorini, Istanbul, Athens, Mykonos, and Naples. In addition, I plan to give a 1-hour lecture at the site of the House of the Virgin Mary, in Ephesus, Turkey. The theme of this particularly special conference will be, In the Wake of Our Spiritual Ancestors, which is also the theme of this Odyssey. During the past 2 weeks I gave 2 public lectures in Scotland and England, where I spent time preparing for the special date of September 30, 2012. This is when we will meet at the stone house that is believed to be where the mother of Jesus was taken by St. John after the crucifixion, and where she lived until her ascension. This house is now a Catholic and Muslim shrine, located on Mount Koros in the vicinity of Ephesus, Turkey. My lecture will take place outside the old stone house where hundreds, if not thousands, of people will pass. A film crew will record this event, as they have been doing during all the conferences and visits to these historic Mediterranean sites. I have been thinking about the spiritual saint who lived not far from this site in Turkey, Maulana Jalal al-Din Rumi. He was a poet, jurist, theologian and, most significantly, a Sufi mystic. And his life overlapped with that of Saint Francis of Assisi for approximately 19 years. Rumi was born in 1207 and he was 19 when Francisco died in 1226. Although he lived during the 20th century, in 2007 he was described as the most popular poet in America. I have been reading and quoting Rumi for almost 30 years. He has become a very important figure in my life, on a par with many of the spiritual teachers I have written about here in these pages. In fact, I have been almost obsessed with the life of this man considered a saint in both the Muslim and Christian world. Its importance is considered to transcend national and ethnic boundaries. In the early 1980s, shortly after the revolution in Iran, I received a letter from a woman named Maryam who lived in Tehran. She had read in her native Farsi a recently published edition of Your Erroneous Zones, and it brought Rumi's works to my consciousness. Since then, he has been in continuous communication with me, through letters from his home in Iran. It has been almost 3 decades since Maryam first connected with me after falling in love with the ideas presented in my first books. Although he lives in a country that seriously limits and discourages any contact with people from the United States, he has a deeply lasting love for me and for the works that I have produced over the last few years or more. Maryam had polio as a child and was unable to stand or walk from 2 to 6 years old. In a dream, a divine spiritual female apparition beckoned her to get up and walk, and she did, first in the dream and then also in her waking physical state. She sends me Rumi's poetry, and dreams of one day meeting who she calls her Shams love. He seems to have developed the same kind of relationship with me that Rumi had with the great spiritual master Shams of Tabriz, who was the inspiration for much of Rumi's vast array of poetry. At the age of, Rumi met her teacher Shams, and it was said that this meeting would change her life. The love that existed between them during the 4 years of their company was considered divine. His love for Shams and his grief following the death of his teacher, some say it was sparked by Rumi's own son, inspired a flood of love poetry that has been translated into many languages and persists to this day. Maryam's letters, gifts, and occasional phone calls throughout the decades speak of a kind of holy love covenant between us that transcends the cultural and global divide that separates us. His most fervent wish is that one day we can meet in person, although that has always seemed impossible because the laws of his country prohibit him from obtaining a visa to visit North America. On the morning of September 2012, our group is preparing for a tour of the charming old city of Istanbul, which I have not seen since I lived in Karamursal in 1974, when I was forced to bribe my departure from Turkey due to the impending war with Greece over the erupting crisis in Cyprus. I am about to board my bus when a head-covering woman stands in front of me with a handwritten sign that reads, "You will see it when you believe it." She asks, "Do you know who I am?" When I find out it's Maryam, we are both overwhelmed with joy. It turns out that he was able to obtain a visa to come to Turkey and has waited all night to meet me in this crowded port with thousands of visitors. One person in our group was unable to come to the bus tour due to illness, so there is an empty seat. Maryam spends the whole day with me and my daughter Serena, and we tearfully say our goodbyes at the end of our visit to the amazing Blue Mosque. I return to the ship and continue my preparations for my conference at the House of the Virgin Mary in Ephesus. I have completely immersed myself in the works of Rumi and Shams of Tabriz, and I select the poems and stories that I want to include in my presentation. I feel the presence of both Rumi and Shams, and Maryam after seeing her for the first time after so many years of communication, especially related to the teachings of these two spiritual ecumenical giants. These teachings go far beyond religion, they represent the very essence of divine love, which is where I see myself now. A student and a teacher of a kind of love that never changes, never varies. It is the same love that is directed to all humanity from God. I arrive in Ephesus via this magnificent cruise ship, a literal floating city, and again I board a bus. Our group will spend a full day in this ancient city, which hides the remains of a Neolithic settlement dating back to 6000 BC. It also contains the largest collection of Roman ruins east of the Mediterranean Sea. It is a fascinating place to see and remember that only an estimated percentage has been excavated. As I walk to my bus, I once again see Miriam. He has changed his plans to fly back to Tehran and has taken a flight, a train, and a bus to accompany me on this visit to Ephesus. Of course, you also want to attend my lecture on Rumi and Shams, as much of it was derived from the material you have sent me for almost 30 years. I think about the time, trouble, and expense that Miriam has been through, and I look at her and see the sheer joy she feels at finally fulfilling her lifelong dream of meeting me in person. I am in a state of shock and excitement. Having Miriam accompany me and my daughter through the excavated city of Ephesus still feels almost like a dream, and now lecturing on Rumi at the house of the Virgin Mary with her present will also be exciting and challenging. This woman has read all of Rumi's works, including the 6-volume Masnavi, which is a spiritual writing that teaches Sufis how to achieve their goal of being in true alignment with God. We took a bus to the top of Nightingale Mountain, where the house of the Virgin Mary is located in a natural park. The 350 members of our group are seated in an area adjacent to the stone house, the foundations of which date back to the 1st century AD. Legend tells us that the Virgin Mary came with the Apostle John to this house, where she lived until her death. I introduce Miriam to the group, including the hundreds of visiting tourists who have stopped by to listen to my talk and watch the video camera crew recording this event. I recite a series of poems by Rumi and Shams and tell of the great love that existed between these venerable spirits. I tell the story of Miriam and myself, and everything it took for her to be by my side on this stage. I remember the story Miriam told me about her years as a polio victim and how a blessed woman in her dream told her to get up and walk, after more than 4 years without even being able to stand. I remember the vision I had of Saint Francis while I was in Assisi and how he appeared for a few seconds as an apparition and told me to get up and heal my diseased right knee, right on the spot. I look to my left and see the royal home where the Virgin Mary came, and I remember how Mary is mentioned not only in Rumi's poetic works but also in the Quran. I complete a 70-minute video presentation on the awakening of our spiritual ancestors, particularly Shams and Rumi, who spoke of a kind of healing love that goes beyond any religion. It is September 30, 2012, the 805th birthday of this man who has become such a divine force in my life, in large part due to the love that Miriam in Iran had for me, and continues to have to this day. From today, we say happy birthday to Rumi, and we go to the house of the Virgin to light a candle and feel the energy of love that surrounds all those present today. I have spent a considerable amount of time in recent months in Assisi, Lourdes, Medjugorje, and now in Ephesus, all places of worship where the apparitions of the Mother of Jesus have been recorded and documented. I mean the birthday of the man whose teachings on divine love have inspired millions of people around the world, regardless of their cultural or religious beliefs. I am with Miriam, who was healed from the devastating effects of polio as a young Muslim woman by the vision of a spiritual apparition. All attendees are moved by these and many other ironies. We boarded our buses after a deeply portentous experience at the Casa de la Virgin. We returned to the port, and I am in the middle of the most tearful sobs when Miriam tells me, "Now I will take you with me to eternity." She gives me a lot of gifts for all my children and almost collapses in my arms when I hug her and say goodbye. You who seek God, apart, apart. What you seek, you are, you are. If you want to seek the face of the beloved, polish the mirror, look at that space. These words were written by Rumi as a tribute to his master guru Shams of Tabriz. When I look back at the shocking day in Ephesus, I believe that these words, which I read just before giving my lecture at the house of the Virgin Mary, are a symbol of the place I have been guided to, not just on this cruise on the Mediterranean and my meeting with Miriam, but also for my whole life. It is about recognizing that God is not something that lives apart from us. If we polish the mirror and look at that space, what we will discover is that God resides in what is reflected. On the anniversary of Rumi's birth, when I made my presentation at that holy site, for the past 3 weeks I had been doing almost nothing but immersing myself in the life and teachings of Maulana Jalal al-Din Rumi and Shams from Tabriz. They were both visitors to my heart and soul, just as Ellis, Maslow, Saint Francis, Lao Tzu, and others had been in earlier times in my life. Having Miriam, who had first introduced me to Rumi and Shams almost years before, appear so completely unexpectedly and stand next to me while I spoke and recited Rumi's poetry was a divine appointment for me. This felt particularly significant as it took place in the last earthly residence of the Mother of Jesus, whom Miriam suspects may have been instrumental in her cure from the polio she experienced until she was 6 years old. Today I can clearly see that all these coincidences that came together on Rumi's birthday in Ephesus allow me to know the meaning of the words attributed to him as a tribute to his teacher, whom he loved so adorably and unconditionally. For Rumi, love is the urge to reunite with spirit, divinity, and the goal toward which all things move. The illusion is that we are separated from this divine source of ours. All our efforts in love, according to Rumi, are to get closer and closer to what is our original nature. This was the essential lesson of both Saint Francis and Lao Tzu, to merge in oneness with God. Abandoning the demands of the ego and living from a place of divine love, a love that never changes, never varies, is steadfast, never slips, as is the love of Jesus, Buddha, and all divine spiritual teachers. That they were leading me to go beyond knowing that we are all pieces of God, and to experience the inner glow that comes to us when we finally know it on an experiential level. I reached a new level of understanding of everything I was reading in the weeks leading up to meeting Miriam and giving my talk on the works of this great Sufi teacher who transcended all religious and cultural identities. This essential message was, and is, that all matter in the universe obeys the law of divine love, which is a movement to evolve and seek unity with the divinity from which it has emerged. These poetic lines express Rumi's teaching and my call to divine love. I wandered the lands of Christendom from beginning to end searching everywhere, but he was not on the cross. I went to the temples where the Indians worship idols and the magicians sing prayers over the fire. I found no trace of him. Riding at full speed, I looked across the Kaaba. But he was not in that sanctuary for young and old. Then I looked directly into my own heart. There, I saw him. He was there and nowhere else. The he that Rumi saw was her own highest self, God within. But beyond this recognition of our own holy presence is the will to be an instrument of this love and to radiate it to all of God's creations. I am challenged to love everyone as Shams challenged Rumi to love beyond any condition or restriction. Loving as Miriam has loved me and my teachings for 3 decades without ever having seen me with her eyes. These are the words he wrote to me after our visits to Turkey. I haven't stopped crying for leaving you yet, on the way home, to work, day and night. Tears flow from my eyes wherever I go, whatever I do. There is no one, not even you, who can understand how I feel after I have returned, only me, God, and Maulana Rumi. Thank me, but it is I who should thank you for calling me on stage to have the honor of being by your side and talking about Maulana Rumi. Morde Bodam Zanazende Shodam, I was dead, I came to life, Jerai Bodam Kande Shodam, it was tears I turned to laughter, Dowlate Esh beloved man Dowlate Payande Shodam, the kingdom of love came and I became the eternal kingdom, Maulana Rumi Wayne, I feel that Rumi is among us, I mean not in the middle, but inside you and me and makes us feel closer than at any other time. This is not an accident. Love is our destiny. When I look back at the amazing events that occurred that day, I remember how for more than 3 decades, Miriam has loved me, through the birth of many of my children, through the death of her own parents, through the healing your own ailments. Through political extremism, through wars and forced separations, he never wavered. She has been a messenger for God, bringing Rumi and Shams of Tabriz to me and allowing my heart to open to a new kind of love. It is not a human love, which changes and varies, not a spiritual love, which varies but never changes, but a divine love, which never changes and never varies. All my endless hours of reading and preparing for that presentation in Ephesus, and I still had no idea that Miriam would just show up on a crowded dock when I got on a bus. As I participated in my preparations and research, I had no idea that I would be at the house of the Virgin Mary. I also didn't realize that I would be there on the birthday of the world's most beloved Master of Divine Love. I sit here and write in a state of amazement at everything that happened that day. Everything to teach me those words from Rumi. Love has arrived and it is like blood in my veins and in my flesh. It has annihilated me and filled me with the Beloved. The Beloved has penetrated every cell of my body. There is only one name left of me, everything else is Him. This is what? My name remains. Love is my essence. And it is my destiny to practice and teach divine love. After. See your life more clearly, now. There are so many benefits that can and will accrue to you if you are willing to examine your own personal history from the perspective of having an open mind and with the intention of seeing everything that has been presented to you with clearer vision. By recounting all the circumstances that were important turning points in my life throughout the pages of this book, I discovered some truths that I would like to share with you so that you too can enjoy the benefits of looking at your life, then and now, through clear lenses. The only fundamental idea I have is that we all live in a universe that has intelligence behind life, and that intelligence is innate in every creation. This universal mind is complete within each of us, and we only have to discover it for its power and perfection to be ours. I urge you to apply an unobstructed view to everything that has happened to you and everyone who has ever entered your life. You are a piece of the creative force that is the matrix of all matter. The events or people that appear in your life are not due to chance and coincidence. Armed with this awareness that accidents cannot occur in a universe that is being directed by a conscious intelligent mind, and that there is some kind of purpose associated with everything that comes into your life because you are part of this matrix of all matter, you can begin to do what I have been doing throughout the writing of this book. Begin to pay close attention and view each event and each circumstance, particularly those that result in dramatic changes, as the guidance of this divine organizing intelligence. Throughout history there have been so many familiar names for this force that inspires human beings to choose to go in a direction that produces beauty, love, and truth. This invisible intelligence is eternally with you and offers you something in every moment, in every encounter, in every situation and in every circumstance. There is something right in front of you, staring you in the face, offering you the option of grabbing yourself and getting on board to travel in a new direction, or ignoring it and ascribing it to nothing more than chance. As you take one more attitude, you will see every aspect of your life very differently. With the benefit of hindsight, I can see and write about these momentous changes that were in the process of taking place. I had no idea how far they really were. Now I can see the entire tapestry of my life as one continuous pattern. I see that this invisible force was offering me free passes to move in the direction of my life purpose. I urge you to look back at your own life with all the honesty and frankness you can muster and see how those strangers that just showed up or those important events that happened offered to encourage you to align with your own life purpose. You always have the option to pay attention and take an unfamiliar and perhaps risky path. You can also choose not to pay attention and stick with the version of your life implanted in you by family and cultural influences that dictate precisely what your limitations and aspirations should be. The real benefit of looking back at all those important events in your life and seeing how that invisible hand of God was there for you at that moment is not repeating your entire past looking for hidden meanings, but waking you up to become a more conscious person. Now, today, in the present moments of his life. What I know for sure is that there are teachers and teachings everywhere. Every moment of our life offers us the opportunity to pay close attention to see the person who approaches us not as a stranger, but as someone who appeared in the right place, at the right time. Seeing an unfortunate event not as my bad luck but asking, what can I learn from this here and now? Instead of going through a long period of suffering before seeing why he aligned himself with this seemingly regrettable circumstance. When I look back at my life, I am not too far off the conclusion that there is some kind of plan that is always at work, even if it is largely unknown as it unfolds. It is not a huge exaggeration for me to conclude that this plan is being directed by the same force that keeps the planets aligned, opens the buds of all flowers and brings to life all kinds of creation here and everywhere in the universe as well. Now I pay much more attention to what is presented to me, and I am willing to listen carefully to any inclination you may have and act on it, even if it takes me into unfamiliar territory. I urge you to do the same. Examine the major turning points in your life and take a good look at all the supposed coincidences that had to come up so that you could change direction. At that moment you consider it a coincidence, you had free will and you made a decision. At that very moment there was something much bigger than you, something you are always connected to, that was also at stake. That something was setting up the details so that you could fulfill the purpose for which you signed up when you made the jump from spirit to form, out of nowhere, to the now here. The teachers are always there. Your willingness to pay attention and listen carefully to your higher self, and act on what your intuitive self tells you, enlivens your awareness of your teachers. Sharpen your perception and be willing to trust that what you feel inside is what you should be doing, regardless of what everything and everyone around you may be saying otherwise. This is the advantage of adopting a mindset. There are many discoveries to be made when you open your mind to the possibility of divine intelligence moving all the pieces of your life in harmony with your ability to have free will and make decisions. He discovers that the Dharma of his life has indeed been established and, within that same predetermined set of reality, he is free to make decisions. You will also discover that this divine force, or the Tao, is nothing more than pure unconditional love. One of my most respected teachers, Carl Jung, expressed the paradox this way: at the very moment that you are a protagonist in your life making decisions, you are also a spear wielder or an extra in a much larger drama. You are condemned to make decisions. This love is limitless and infinite, and when you think and behave in a way that matches this divine love, that is when you are able to draw guidance from this realm to help you direct your life in a God-realized way. It is in these moments of pure love that you can experience miraculous events. This is when the angels of the divine realm of spirit can be there for you and you become aware of their presence. It is in these times of unconditional generosity, or when your inner focus is exclusively on, how can I reach out and serve? Instead of the ego's selfish demands, saying, what's in it for me? May these guides of pure love recognize themselves in you and come forward to put you on your way to resurgence with your original source of being, with God and your designated guides. Throughout my life, it was when I suspended and tamed my ego that miracles occurred and it invisibly urged me to make a change in my life path. I urge you to look at the events in your own life, even from when you were a child and up to the present, and examine what was happening within you that propelled you in a new direction. So, and this is of the utmost urgency, become aware of any of your own inner thoughts that are critical, or condemning toward any of God's children, including yourself. When you are able to shift your inner thoughts towards unconditional love, even towards those who have been designated as your enemies, you will open yourself to the guidance that pushes you onto the path that leads to your own self-realization and God-realization. This is the advantage of seeing with clearer eyes. It can help you now, in this present moment, to get away from a path that leads to self-sabotage. As you change the way you look at things to stay in that place of divine love, the things you look at begin to change as well. This is because in these higher vibrational frequencies of unconditional love, you are vibrating in unity with the source of all, that which we have come to call God. As I have said many times in writing this book, with God, with love, all things are possible, and that includes attracting angels of love to guide you in the moment. Seeing your own life more clearly implies being very aware of everything that creates excitement in your being. If it excites you, the very presence of that inner emotion is all the evidence you need to remind you that you are aligned with your true essence. When you are following your bliss, you are more willing to receive guidance from the spirit realm. This is called synchronicity, a state in which you almost feel as if you are in a collaboration agreement with destiny. This has been the primary story of my own life. When I listen carefully to those internal signals, they seem to tell me, that is why you are here. Now you are truly aligned with your higher self, there is nothing to fear, just do what your emotion tells you to do. And that is precisely what I have done in recapitulating the seemingly disparate events that have formed the entire tapestry of my life thus far. For much of your life, you've likely been careful to follow your inner passion, because you've been programmed since childhood to follow someone else's idea of what you should be doing. His family, his culture, his circle of friends, his immediate surroundings, all conspire to chart the path of his life. When you've ignored that programming and followed what your inner enthusiasm dictated, you probably thrived in a more satisfying way, even when you were criticized and judged as selfish. When I look back at many of the decisions that I made that led me down a very different path, it is clear that I was making those decisions solely on the basis of what seemed right to me, which made me feel passionate and enthusiastic, even when the potential for failure and disappointment was a real possibility. See your own life more clearly today, right here, right now in this moment, refusing to ignore what awakens passion and enthusiasm within you. You came here with music to play, so when you begin to harmonize with what only you hear in your mind, listen carefully and stop on its way and be willing to take the first step in the direction of those synchronic calls. This is your highest calling self. This is your resurgence with your source of being. It may not make any sense to those around you, and it may even seem ridiculous to you too, but know that in the end you will not be disappointed. In fact, whoever and whatever you need will eventually appear in their unforeseen divine perfection. Even if nothing seems to be going well and everything seems pessimistic, stick with your excitement. Declare that you are in a state of faith and trust, ponder your vision, and support will finally be available. The reason it serves your inner enthusiasm is because in those moments, which only you know, you are aligned with who you really are. During your life, as in mine, there have been special teachers who have repeatedly made themselves known. I have detailed how St. Francis of Assisi, Lao Tzu, Jalal al-Din Rumi, Abraham Maslow, Dr. Mildred Peters, Albert Ellis, and many others have continually come forward and presented their offerings to me precisely when they have been most needed, and when it became clear that he was finally ready to accept and implement his divinely inspired guidance. If you are willing to review your past with a loving conscience, you will recognize many teachers who have been there for you throughout your own life. You were willing to listen to some of them at that moment and act according to what they offered you due to your level of preparation, and other times your level of preparation was at such a low level that you did not even recognize the divine moment of their arrival or comeback. Begin now to become aware of and welcome the help that is continually made available to you in your daily life. After spending most of the past year reviewing the many teachers and teachings that have influenced the overall path my life has taken, I can clearly see that I have been in some invisible ascended master training since my arrival here. In May 1940. And you too. We all originate from the same source of divine love. As we grow and mature, we all have the freedom to choose to stay connected to this source, or to leave God behind and live up to the demands and inclinations of our false self, the ego. Ralph Waldo Emerson, another one of those ascended masters who has been knocking on the door of my inner consciousness since I was a teenager, and perhaps even earlier, offers us this observation. Within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, with which each part and particle is equally related, the eternal. Yes, he said, it is within us. That means you too. This is your inheritance from your source of origin, and this Eternal One continually sends emissaries. They are composed exclusively of the wise silence, the universal beauty. It is up to you whether or not to follow his strong urges or ignore them because you are not prepared for such advice. These beings of light and love are all around you and have been since you came to this physical presence with which you identify so strongly. They leave clues and omens, and sometimes their guidance is subtle and confusing, but they are there, and all you need to do is start paying attention to your intuitive feelings and then act fearlessly on what they seem to be communicating to you. The more you trust this intuition, the more you will see things in pure alignment with your own dharma. Go with what you feel inside, the beat of your soul activating your enthusiasm. It is inviting you to the next step on the ladder of a life that leads to the light. As Rumi said, the moment you entered this world of existence, a ladder was placed before you to help you escape. Translation by Andrew Harvey. I am grateful to you for permission to reprint this quote. There are so many helping hands that invite you to take control and move forward to escape the illusion of this world of existence. Ascended masters, angels of your higher self, well-meaning teachers, family members, strangers, a series of events, and what seem like strange circumstances, all are working seriously to help you ascend the ladder that is rooted in ordinary consciousness and ascends to the heavenly world of extraordinary life and higher consciousness. Be willing to be persuaded to move fearlessly to the next rung and the next, paying close attention to your guides. Our ultimate mission here, in this physical incarnation on planet Earth, is to resurface with our source, the only eternal one, to recognize ourselves as a being of love and light, a piece of God, so to speak, and to practice thinking and acting on our own. The same way that God does. Every turning point or moment of insight that helped me climb that ladder that was placed before me at birth came about as a result of an inner intuitive knowing that I had to put less and less emphasis on my ego and its continual thoughts of what it is. In this for me, I learned that I wanted and needed to change to act and think like God. God, our source, the great Tao, the divine mind, is about serving, reaching and taming the selfish demands of the ego that always insists on more things, more popularity, more approval, more recognition, more earning and more ownership. When I go on to contemplate what is the best way to reach as many people as possible with a message of hope, kindness, joy and, above all, love, and exchange of material benefits, I feel the emotion expand within me. So it seems that the most synchronous help just shows up right on an invisible schedule to me. Examine your own movement to see more clearly, and when you are at what you know to be a crossroads, or where two roads diverge in a forest, ask for help. Seek advice to move in the direction in which the ego is less and less a determining factor. Ask yourself how to fulfill your soul purpose by serving others first. Critics may say that my life's work is making money and making a name for myself so that I can enjoy fame and popularity. I have spent thousands and thousands of hours sitting alone at a desk, in front of blank sheets of paper waiting to be filled with the ideas that resonate within me. I can honestly say that I have never engaged in this lonely activity of writing books with the idea in my head that I was going to make money, or acquire fame for all my efforts. Every step on that ladder that Rumi talks about has been taken because I have been guided and pushed by so many teachers and profound teachings that it was almost impossible for me not to put my foot on the next ascending rung and pull the rest of my physical apparatus towards a more exalted and elevated consciousness. It all happened because I was willing and ready to reach out and serve and to spend time and energy alone in a room away from all distractions, and I put on the pad of paper before me what I absolutely insisted on being expressed by me during the betterment of others in some way that I never need to fully understand. Whatever fame and wealth that came into my life is not because I was chasing it. All the results are because I actively followed my enthusiasm and trusted the guidance that emerged along the way, and because something within me practically forced me to do this work. It is the same thing that has pushed me tonight to leave the comfort of my home and my family and sit here writing. As Dr. Redl used to tell us, self-actualized people should be what they can be. They do not know how to repress those burning inner desires that simply must be expressed. External rewards are just bonuses that come when you confidently move in the direction of your own dreams and strive to live the life you have envisioned, to quote Henry David Thoreau. As you may have read, he is one of those teachers who has come forward to me since I was a 15-year-old boy awaiting punishment for my civil disobedience in high school. Review your life at the key moments when you were involved in some kind of climactic experience and were pushed in a new direction. Think about your soul and what it really means to be motivated by your inner thoughts, rather than using an artificial outer barometer as your life guide. Promotions are nice, salary increases are, of course, welcome. A gold watch is a good symbol of a long and devoted life, a grade on a transcript, a trophy, and many more are external indexes. They do not calm or satisfy your soul. Your soul is not finite, it has no form, it has no beginning or end. It needs to expand, grow, to avoid being labeled or compartmentalized. Every move I made in my life was in the direction of greater freedom that gave me the ability to decide for myself where to be each day, what to wear, how to speak, how my writing would develop. These were thrusts from my soul, the invisible inner part of me that is infinite and therefore always seeking expansion. Stay in touch and honor the call you feel deep within you. Ignoring that will make you feel like a prisoner in your own body and in your own private world. Your soul is miserable when it is confined, tagged, or told what it can and cannot do. Its main theme screams, "Don't lock me up." As you begin to see more and more clearly not only how and why your life took all its twists and turns, but what direction it will take from now on, you will see that your soul will never divert you. This is because this is really who you are, not your accomplishments or possessions, but that inner sense of purpose that seeks vastness and expansion. Listen when he calls you at a certain address, or when he sends you a teacher, or sets up a synchronous series of events. It all feels so eerily exciting when it happens because your outer world is finally connecting with your soul's innate need to keep expanding. It must and will always stimulate it in this way because it is infinite and therefore must continue to grow. What is infinite cannot be labeled or put in any kind of box for safekeeping. Doing so would deny its own nature and make it the opposite of infinity, which is finite. As I review many of the momentous changes that took place in my life, I can see much more clearly now that much of what prompted me to climb higher steps of the ladder, which Rumi described as my escape route from this material world, was I use it from my own imagination. If I could have a clear image of myself focused on a new endeavor within my imagination, and if I could train myself to act as if that inner image was already a present fact, the rest of the work of making it all materialize seemed to be almost seamless. Effort. When I was in the Navy, I thought to myself, I was going to college. Trying to escape a war zone in Turkey, I saw myself leaving the country long before the opportunity presented itself. In dealing with resistance from my first editor, I had a very different picture in my imagination than the experts had in mind for me in my book. And that's how it has been for most of my life. Use your own imagination as an internal model of what you absolutely intend to manifest. Then act as if that current dream is a present fact. This has been my secret tactic to manifest the life I intended to live. I urge you to make full use of this procedure detailed in my book Wishes Fulfilled. Examine the relevant moments in your own life when you felt compelled to move in a particular direction, considering how much faith you were able to place in that magical creative place within yourself, your imagination. Everything that exists now in your life and in this entire physical world had to be imagined first. So if you can't imagine it and act like it's already a fait accompli, then you can't make it your reality. I use the phrase I am as a statement of fact, regardless of what people around me say, or even what my own eyes and ears tell me to be true. I am is the name that God used to identify himself with Moses and with all future generations. I encourage you to use these two words to first see in your imagination what it is that you intend to see, manifest in your physical reality. I declare every day that I am well, I am in perfect health, I am happy, I am love, I am God. I don't need to see the numbers on a medical report or hear someone else's opinion about my health. This great mystical power is available to you. Use God's name as your affirmation to create the life you want, to become the person you want to become. When you make an absolute statement by placing your I am presence squarely at the center of your imagination, and refuse to consider any other option, you achieve the results you thought you were only imagining. When you assume the feeling of your wish is already fulfilled, your wish eventually hardens and becomes a physical reality. Use this presence of I am for everything that you intend to manifest from this day forward. When you do it with integrity and an inner knowing that does not allow for skepticism or doubt, you will begin to see how you can take charge of your life in your human hands. Reconnect with your source of being and live a divinely inspired life as a co-creator with God. I love this Oscar Wilde quote, "To become the spectator of your own life, is to escape the suffering of life." It offers the key to the end of all suffering. All you have to do is become a spectator of your own life. I call this cultivating your testimony. The way out of any discomfort is to simply start noticing who is doing or not doing anything. If you are sad, all you have to do is realize who is experiencing the sadness. The one who realizes it is already free from sadness. If you pay close attention, you will notice that sadness is not you, it is just a part of the nature of a human being. But you, as a viewer, are simply the inner being that is aware of everything you are noticing. Daily I cultivate and invite the kind loving witness to replace my being so identified with what I am observing. Who I am is an invisible and formless piece of the great divine mind, the Tao, God. When I observe everything that I envision before me, not as what I am attached and connected to, but rather as an attentive and curious viewer, I eliminate my potential suffering. My attachment to the result dissolves. All beliefs that I am unworthy are removed and I answer the question, who am I? As Michael Singer so lucidly did in his exhilarating book The Untethered Soul, I am the one who sees. From here, somewhere, I look outside and am aware of the events, thoughts, and emotions that pass before me. This is where you and I live. This is precisely how you come to see your life more clearly than ever. Just notice, and then see who is noticing, and remember that this is you, this is your true essence. I have noticed throughout the writing of this book and in reviewing many of the salient factors that pushed me to a higher rung on the ladder, that the less I identified with what I wanted to achieve, the freer I was to allow it to manifest. By simply sitting and watching as an interested but detached viewer, I was often able to go far beyond even what I was noticing. The less attached I became to what I wanted to achieve in my life, and the more I cultivated this idea of testimony, the more I could look at the next stage of my life with a new and less worrisome vision. I loved what was put before me, but I had no attachment to the result. As I come to the end of looking back at my life thus far, I am grateful that I have been able to see so much more clearly how and why so many of the events, circumstances, and teachers appeared to guide me in this path of self-discovery. All my life I wanted to feel the thrill of being a person who would and could make a difference in this world. There has been an invisible guide for me in each and every step of the way, as well as for you too. To access that guide, I encourage you to commit to being absolutely true to what exists nowhere but within you. This is the great secret to seeing more and more clearly and living your life from a place of passion and purpose. Love. I am Wayne. And I can see clearly now. Wayne Dyer.